The never-ending bedtime story. Listen closely, listen well. The never-ending bedtime story. For bedtimes and bath times and long car rides. Tune in, enjoy the story. Write the next bit, send it in. The never-ending bedtime story. Let's imagine with Natasha.
Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the Never-Ending Bedtime Story podcast. I'm Natasha, the author, here with Alice, my sound engineer and editor. And this podcast is for those of you with fantastical imaginations, ready to go on a fantasy adventure to other worlds far beyond. Whether you're in the car on the way to school, having your hair done, in the bath, or tucked up, all snuggly and ready for bed. This is the only podcast where you can influence the story. Stay tuned until the end to find out more about that. Oh, and in this series, you'll be meeting 2 rabbits who are not boys or girls. Sometimes we use ze or them instead of he or she to describe one rabbit. But don't worry, it won't be confusing when we get there. And so, without further ado, let's begin. Once upon a time, in a universe 2 trillion light years away, on a planet called Elrosnia, there lived a dragon called Blueberry. On Elrosnia, dragons grow in beautiful, egg-like cocoons on giant silver trees. And when the first cherry blossom in spring arrives every year, the next generation of dragons are born. Blueberry was no bigger than a cuddly teddy bear when he was adopted by 2 very kind rabbits who taught him all about the world. They taught him how to blow his nose. Very good, Blue. How to ride a dragon bicycle. Whoa! How to watch his manners at the dinner table. Blue, excuse you. How to be kind to everyone and never rude. Excuse me, please. Sorry, thank you. How to bake incredible cakes. And many more creative and practical skills. By the time Blueberry was 10, he was fluent in all 26 languages spoken on Elrosnia, and even crafted himself some specially made baking utensils for his little arms. His 2 rabbit parents were extremely proud. The young Blue was now the height of a small barn door and towered over his parents. Now that he was much taller and much bigger, Sydney Rabbit converted the nearby stables into a bedroom for him. But the 3 of them would often huddle together, look up at the stars in wonder, and observe the other universes at night. The family of 3 was as happy as could be, or so we thought. There was only one problem with this fantastical family. Blueberry the dragon couldn't fly. Much like a mother bird urging its baby bird to make its first flight, there comes a time when a dragon must be encouraged to use their wings, for if they don't, they may never be able to. Only one's parents have the authority to teach this incredible skill. But needless to say, Blue's rabbit parents didn't know how. They would both wonder and wonder every night about how to resolve the problem. Oh goodness, we've failed at parenting. If we can't fly because we don't have wings, how on earth are we going to teach Blue? Sam exclaimed one evening. Many years of being a sports coach made Sam quite a determined and enthusiastic rabbit. After a long, hard night of discussing and thinking, of pondering and questioning, accompanied by a glass or 2 of a very bitter bumblenut drink, the 2 parents decided that they'd make it their mission to teach Blue to fly. Day 1 of flying lessons. Operation Bouncy Sheet began with Sam Rabbit flinging open the door to Blueberry's stable at 5 a.m. Good morning! Splash! Sam flung an entire bucket of water over Blueberry's head. Blue jumped up and shouted, "What did you do that for, Sam?" shaking the water off vigorously, his strong tail whipping side to side. "Well, I had to give you a big shot to make sure you wouldn't go back to sleep. Also, 5 a.m. is the golden hour of champions, and that is what we shall be. Quickly brush your teeth and meet me in the workshop in 5 minutes, please." Blueberry had never been woken up in such a way in his life, and he never wished to again. He did as Sam said, took the broom hanging from the wall, brushed his teeth, and made his way to the workshop, still half asleep and with water in his ears. When he arrived at the workshop, what stood in the centre, amid other small woodwork projects, was a round sheet of woven reeds, suspended in the centre of a circular metal pole with thick springs attaching it all together. Sam and their wild inventions again, Blueberry thought. "Give me a hand, please, dear," Sam asked, and the two of them shoved and kicked the circular table-looking thing out the other side of the workshop. "Now, dear, what I'd like you to try is to step onto the middle of the sheet, and don't worry, I've used some bonbon reeds for extra strength. Then I'd like you to jump as high as you possibly can, and the spring should mean you bounce into the air. Then try and flap your wings, and hopefully you'll start flying." Blue looked back at Sam with a very unconvinced expression on his face. But what did he have to lose? He kicked his leg up and tumbled onto the sheet, flipped up onto both legs, and realised the sheet was bouncy. He bent his wide knees and pushed himself up in the air. "Wow! This is loads of fun!" he called to Sam. With every landing, he propelled himself back into the air. "I'm so glad! Now, try and use your wings. Can you use the momentum?" I'm not sure, but I'll give it a go," Blue counted in his head. 1, 2, 3. Did the biggest jump he had tried so far, and on his final push, he fell straight through the bottom of the sheet, with his feet and tail touching the grass and his top half sticking out at the top, looking much like a hippopotamus wearing a ballet skirt. Sam looked over at Blueberry in shock, but seeing the humongous skirt surrounding him, Blue looked back and couldn't help but burst out laughing. And Sam joined in, because Blue did look very silly and was luckily completely unhurt. After they had laughed themselves senseless, Sydney Rabbit came bounding out of the burrow to see what all of the noise was about. And with one look at Blueberry wearing the sheet and metal pole around his waist, Sydney too started howling with laughter. And Sam and Blueberry were set off all over again. The three of them finally composed themselves, and the two parents managed to wrangle the sheet off him. The family decided they'd take themselves off for some bumblenut drink at the local cave. Obviously, Blue had some linalool juice instead. After a cosy evening, the family strolled back home, pampered by the scent of sweet summer viola flowers. As Blueberry bounded ahead, Sam and Sydney walked paw in paw, looking out over the valley and watching buzzing creatures fly about the place with such ease. As challenging as this mission was, Sam and Sydney knew the fight couldn't be over, and a new idea started to bubble and bubble. Day 2 arrived. Sam Rabbit had spent all night working on a new contraption, and this time it was even more adventurous. Realising that the bouncy sheet idea was never going to work, Sam decided to build 2 propellers and 2 pulleys to attach to Blue's wings. That way, when he jumped in the air, the propellers would take him a few meters off the ground, and then, whilst hovering in midair, Blue would use the pulleys to move his wings in an up and down motion, and he'd be flying. Luckily for Blueberry, Sam decided against the bucket of water this morning. Instead, there was a rigorous exercise plan, full of back-strengthening exercises, to make sure he was super fit and in peak physical condition. Blueberry was beginning to dread flying lessons. "Just come over here, son." And Sam took his ladder from the wall, propped it up, and hoisted one propeller at a time onto each of Blue's wings. The time came to give the idea a proper trial, and Sydney made sure she was awake to watch the entire performance. Blue trudged out of the workshop with both propellers secured and a pulley attached to each of his arms, and Sydney prepared a runway with white stones to guide him. When Blue reached the start of the runway, he looked back at the rabbits, who were both grinning with hope. "I can do this," Blue said to himself, and he ran with all of his might down the runway and then jumped as high as he could, the propellers lifting him 3 meters off the ground. Blue could feel the muscles in his back engage, and he tried to use the pulleys, but all of a sudden his left pulley snapped and he came tumbling down onto Mr. Next Door's spiky bimbleberry bushes. "Ouch!" Blueberry cried, and the parents ran over to help. By the time they had pried Blue out of the bush, he had spikes all over him, and Sydney spent the next 3 hours removing every one.
Hold still now, please. Otherwise it'll only take longer.
The family were beginning to lose hope, but Sam and Sydney had one last idea to try before they gave up completely. Day 3, and something in the air felt different. Knowing that time was running out before Blue became too old to fly, both parents decided that they might need to ask for help from someone or something else. They considered all of their friends who lived nearby. There was a lovely family of crocodilias who were great at cooking, a whole community of Pompeidians who were brilliant square ball players, and of course their neighbours, Mr. Next Door and the Dung Birds, who, well, we won't go into their skills, but in summary, no one close by knew how to teach a dragon to fly. Sam and Sydney soon realised that if they were going to get answers, they would have to go further than the burrow. They would have to speak to the Dragon Sensei on planet Varga. "But how do we get to the Dragon Sensei?" Sydney questioned. "She is 36 trillion light years away in a completely different universe." And with that, right before their eyes, a sparkle glimmered in midair in the shape of a hedgehog, and then as quickly as it appeared, it slipped away on the wind that brought it in. Now, a 3D image of a sparkly hedgehog appearing out of thin air, you might ask, but it had been known that a team of technological hedgehogs who controlled satellites on the far east side of the planet sometimes made themselves known to those in true need of assistance. They called themselves the Hedgehog Squad. And these 6 hedgehogs were so clever you couldn't even imagine. They knew everything there was to know about the cosmos and were so talented that they discovered a way to connect with living beings on other planets. "Shmeebop zoombop," the mirage said, as it appeared once more, even bigger than before. Hello?" Sam couldn't quite believe Z was speaking to a floating, 3-dimensional hedgehog in their humble burrow. "We would like to invite your family to our glass house in order to assist you with your quest to help the young Blueberry fulfill his flying potential. We have ordered a bubble to collect you. You have 1 hour to pack any belongings the 3 of you may need, and I'd advise that you prepare for this to be a long trip once we've helped you on your way to planet Varga. We hope this will be of some help. Kind wishes, the Hedgehog Squad." Both rabbits looked at each other in utter puzzlement, but there wasn't a moment to lose. They began creeping around the burrow, collecting some celery and carrots for snacking on, and bustled into the barn where Blue was sleeping soundly. "Oh no, not again! These early mornings are becoming really difficult. Wait, it doesn't look like morning outside. What's going on, Sydney?" "Well, my dear, you're not wrong. In fact, it's -17 o'clock in the morning, but we've had an unexpected visit from a floating 3D hedgehog hologram." "What on earth? How did I manage to miss that?" Blue exclaimed excitedly. "Sam and I will explain on the way. Now, grab some snacks and a bucket of water from the riverside and meet us by the burrow in 1 hour. We're being escorted to the Far East." "Wow!" Blue had heard of the Far East only from eavesdropping on conversations at the cave. He had heard incredible things about 6 magical hedgehogs that lived there. Once again, he did as he was told, picked up some snacks and water, and found himself at the burrow. It was a little chilly as the winds swirled around the reeds and grasses. The family of 3 stood jiggling about, waiting for the so-called bubble to collect them. 5 minutes went by, and they saw nothing but the beautiful starflies buzzing in the air, their pretty pink mouths always smiling. Sam and Sydney looked at each other confused, their going-away bags feeling heavy on their backs. Had they imagined what happened just an hour earlier? Had they both conjured this up in their heads because they were so desperate to help Blueberry? It seemed like the most likely idea. Trying not to give up hope, Sydney said, "Just another 5 minutes." And with that, Blue shouted, "Look!" pointing down to the ground beneath where they were standing. The reeds were starting to glisten underneath their feet, and the glimmering patch began to spread out slightly, and then it grew upwards. "The bubble is forming around us," Blue announced, and like magic, a huge animal-sized bubble was beginning to lift off the ground, taking its passengers with it. Up and up and up it flew, higher and higher until it reached the clouds. "I can see our burrow and our barn. I can see the riverside and the cave." And then the bubble zipped through the air at the speed of light. It zipped through hundreds of clouds, moving faster and faster. All they could see was white light surrounding them as they floated inside the bubble, tipping upside down and side to side, until it began to slow and fall and slow further and fall further, down and down, leaving the clouds above. The family looked around and didn't recognize what they saw one bit. There were just 2 buildings as far as the eye could see, and both of them were made entirely of glass. Everywhere was snowy, and giant rocky mountains were covered in shards of crystal. This place looked very unusual. Blue looked out nervously as the bubble drifted closer and closer towards one of the glass buildings. Sam gave him a big, reassuring cuddle, and the family of 3 held pause as they made their final descent. Eventually, the bubble carried its passengers right to the door of one of the glass houses, and as it touched the ground, it burst immediately. Sydney looked at Blue, Blue looked at Sam, and Sam looked at Sydney. And with a deep breath, Sam reached out to ring the doorbell. But the door swung open, and they saw... And that's it for this week. Many, many thanks to all the amazing people that have helped me create this, especially Antonio for the jingle, Alice for being my sound engineer and editor, and my fantastic trial group for all their feedback. And now it's over to you, my wonderful listeners. If you've got a great idea for what should happen next to Blueberry the Dragon and the rest of the team, please ask a parent or guardian to help you to email it to tnebspodcast@yahoo.com. The wackier the better, please. Any author whose ideas I use will have their name read out at the end of next week's episode. Unless you'd rather it wasn't, of course. Please send in entries by this coming Friday. Parents and guardians, feel free to follow TNEBS Podcast on socials for further information. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye!